The city of Chicago, having seen phenomenal growth in trade and commerce in the 19th century, is now full of energy, vigor, and monetary wealth. The vibrant city is now getting ready to host the grandest fair that the world had ever seen, named the World's Columbian Exposition, commemorating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America. The exposition, spread over 1,037 acres of land on the shore of Lake Michigan, is scheduled to start from May 1st, 1893, and will continue for 6 months, concluding in October. New mansions have been erected to house innumerable exhibits. The fair's objective is to showcase the highest achievements in science, arts, and medicine. In addition, for the first time ever in history, it also plans to organize the world's Parliament of Religions. The Parliament's mission is to bring together in conference the leading representatives of all religions around the globe. News announcing this first of its kind Parliament has already been sent all over the world, inviting delegates from all religions. And sure enough, it did not fail to reach the quaintest village in a country where religion is the very soul of the nation. In the southernmost tip of India, where the land merges into Indian Ocean, a young monk, 29 years in age, is looking intensely towards a rock, at a distance rising up in the oceans. His eyes, bold and wide, were filled with an irresistible quest for an answer on the very purpose of his existence. Born on January 12, 1863, in Kolkata, his parents named him Narendranath. During his school and college years, he exhaustively studied science, arts, and philosophy of both the East and the West. While in college, he became the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, whom the scholars and mystics in those days viewed as the living embodiment of religion and spirituality. Narendranath received the crest jewel of spiritual wisdom from his teacher Sri Ramakrishna, and yet his heart was yearning to unravel the goal of his life. After the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, Narendranath took monastic vows along with his brother disciples, and in the quest of his mission, travelled all across India, from the Himalayas in the north, Gujarat in the west, and finally reached Cape Comorin, the southernmost tip of the nation. His heart, by then, was heavy and restless, having witnessed the miseries and poverty of the masses all over the country. And the only thought in his mind then was to find ways to remove their miseries. As he looked on with great yearning at the high waves of the ocean, a thought struck, and he immediately plunged into the sea. Swimming across, he reached the large rock offshore. Climbing to the top of the rock, he sat down, overlooking the ocean waters, and soon merged into deep meditation. In the depths of meditation, finally, he received the answer that he had so desperately been seeking. The clear-eyed visionary in this monk saw that religion was the backbone of the Indian nation. Falsehood, superstition, and hypocrisy, those were practiced in the name of religion, were indeed the cause of India's downfall. He realized India would rise again to heights of lost prosperity through a renewal and restoration of that highest spiritual consciousness which had made her at all times the cradle of nations and the cradle of faith. He himself had discovered that the knowledge of God's presence in man was the source of man's strength and wisdom. Sitting at that rock in Cape Comorin, he was determined to awaken this sleeping divinity. There flashed before his mind the new continent of America, a land of optimism, great wealth, and unstinted generosity. He saw America as a country of unlimited opportunities, where people's mind were free from the encumbrance of castes or classes. He would give the receptive Americans the ancient yet ever rejuvenating wisdom of India and bring back to his motherland in exchange the knowledge of science and technology. If he succeeded in his mission to America, he would not only enhance India's prestige in the West, but create a new confidence among his own fellow countrymen. News of the Parliament of Religions in Chicago had already reached India by then. Scholars, governors of various provinces, and even young college students who were amongst the Swami's friends, disciples, and admirers urged him to go to Chicago and represent the most ancient religion of human history, Hinduism. They collected funds to meet his travel and living expenses abroad. On the request of the Maharaja of Khetri, Swami took up the name Vivekananda, meaning one who delights in the knowledge of discrimination between the real and the unreal. Swami Vivekananda, reverentially addressed as Swamiji, now decided to start his voyage to America. A few days before departure, he told his brother disciples, "I traveled all over India, but alas, it was agony to me, my brothers, to see with my own eyes the terrible poverty of the masses, and I could not restrain my tears. It is now my firm conviction that to preach religion amongst them, without first trying to remove their poverty and suffering, is futile. It is for this reason, to find means for the salvation of the poor of India, that I am going to America." On May 31st, 1893, Swami Vivekananda sailed for America in the ship named Peninsula. Starting at the Bombay Harbour, Peninsula sailed towards the Pacific, and on the way, Swamiji visited Colombo in Sri Lanka, Singapore, Penang in Malaysia, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and other cities in the Japanese coastline. Finally, from Yokohama, he boarded the ship Empress of India, which cruised straight towards North America. Empress of India arrived in Vancouver, British Columbia, 7 p.m. July 25th. Alighting from the ship, Swamiji boarded a Canadian Pacific Railway train towards his final destination, the city of Chicago. Aboard the train, looking out from the train's observation car, with much excitement, he witnessed the captivating sights and sceneries of North Pacific, snow-capped mountains and lush green valleys. Catherine Sanborn, a renowned orator and writer, was also aboard the same car. A resident of the New England area, she lived in a farmhouse near Boston. In her own words, Kate Sanborn recollects this meeting in her memoirs.
I had met him in the observation car of the Canadian Pacific, where even the gigantically grand scenery of mountains, canyons, glaciers, and the Great Divide could not take my eyes entirely from the cosmopolitan travelers, all en route for Chicago. But most of all, I was impressed by the monk, a magnificent specimen of manhood, 6'2", as handsome as Salvini at his best, with a lordly, imposing stride, as if he ruled the universe, and soft, dark eyes that could flash fire if roused, or dance with merriment if the conversation amused him. He wore a bright yellow turban, many yards in length, a red ochre robe, the badge of his calling. This was tied with a pink sash, broad and heavily befringed. Snuff-brown trousers and russet shoes completed the outfit. He spoke better English than I did, was conversant with ancient and modern literature, would quote easily and naturally from Shakespeare or Longfellow or Tennyson, Darwin, Mueller, Tyndall, could repeat pages from our Bible, was familiar with and tolerant of all creeds. He was education, an illumination, a revelation.
Kate Sanborn was a famous socialite, and her hospitality was well known. Her keen observation immediately caught the distinctiveness of Swamiji's demeanor and conversance. She gave him an open invitation to visit her farmhouse near Boston. Swamiji honorably accepted Miss Sanborn's invitation. As the train drove into Chicago, he alighted all by himself on the platform of a city dazzling in its own glory of cultural and economic prosperity, and probably prepared enough to welcome the brilliance of this Hindu monk, only 30 years in age. In the sprawling fairgrounds on the bank of Lake Michigan, Swamiji marveled at what the Western world had achieved through hard work, friendly cooperation with one another, and the application of scientific knowledge. Not too many years ago, Chicago had consisted of only a few fishermen's huts, and now, at the magic touch of human ingenuity, it was turned into a fairyland. With much appreciation, Swamiji noticed the intense accumulation of wealth, power, and inventive genius in the nation. On Swamiji's part, his first feeling was one of unbounded admiration. Very soon, however, a shocking discovery unveiled. To attend the Parliament of Religions as a delegate, it was required to register in advance, and the date of registration was already over. Delegates were also required to provide appropriate credentials of religious authority. Swamiji had no such papers of credentials with him. As a newly arrived foreigner, he was unknown to Chicago or to America. So how to arrange for those credentials? To make matters worse, Swamiji also discovered that the Parliament of Religions would not convene until September, which meant a wait of more than a month. The money that his disciples and admirers had put together was already dwindling to pay for the daily expenses. It was doubtful if the money would last till September. How then would he continue to live in Chicago for all that time? Let's say somehow funds are arranged, but without appropriate papers of credentials, how could he even join the Parliament of Religions? So what would he do now? What Swamiji did at this point was unplanned and unexpected, and yet most charming, as in time it perfectly resolved all these concerns. He decided to accept the very first invitation he had received in America, the invitation from Miss Kate Sanborn, whom he met aboard the train from Vancouver. So he took the train and started towards the city of Boston. Boston, the gateway city in New England. And our story begins. Along the northeastern seaboard of the United States of America, 6 states, namely Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island together gets referred as New England. The states are relatively small in size. Due to their geographical proximity, they share similar climate and culture. New England is one of the earliest English settlements of North America. Characterized by 4 seasons, this region has played a leading role in the history of American freedom and overall development since 17th century. Over the years, it has emerged as a prominent center of art, culture, and education, and is often referred as Athens of America. Swamiji's arrival at Boston in 1893 was just a beginning of his sojourn. Over the following years, he returned to this area time and again and visited many places in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, and Connecticut. It was probably a hot and humid August midday when the train drove into Boston as Swami Vivekananda stepped into the city. Kate Sanborn, well known